Hello, welcome to the MuseScore Café for today, February 26th. I have to think about that always. And 2020. My name is Marc Sabatella. I'm the Director of Education for MuseScore, and this is my weekly series of MuseScore Cafés where I pick some topic to chat about and demonstrate things and so forth. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Ah. All right, good. Yes, so my topic for today is really special. I'm going to be bringing on a guest, Philip Rothman, in just a moment. Before I do, I want to just check and see who's here. And good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone here. I see Europe. I see Colorado and who knows where. So hello everyone, and feel free to be leaving comments, asking questions and so forth for me and or for Philip as we go along. And yeah, we'll just do our usual thing, but we're gonna have the guests, and it's gonna be, hopefully everything's gonna work out fine. It's my first time doing that. So Philip Rothman, I suppose I could have checked on a bio, but I'll tell you what I know about him, and then he can confirm or deny. Is a professional copyist and music engraver in New York City, and he is known to many people throughout the world as the head of the what is currently called Scoring Notes, a blog that was formerly called Sibelius blog, but it's now more general, and it's really kind of considered the premier source of information about music notation software. So, and he has a really interesting product that he's developed that he's going to be showing you in a minute. Also, it's like a control device where you can use it as an additional way of entering markings and so forth into various different notation programs, including now MuseScore. So we're going to talk to Philip, and without further ado, here hopefully is Philip Rothman. Hey, Philip, you, I believe, are on.
Okay, great.
So let me check that on my. Oh, I just closed my other screen. Is everyone seeing Philip? Let's go to chat. Y'all seeing Philip? Oh yeah, link to the blog. I got that coming in a sec. Here's link. Go back to the chat. Yep, you're on, Philip. All right, so
Great.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Marc. Hi, everybody at the MuseScore Cafe. Maybe one day there'll be an actual MuseScore Cafe with some cup of Java and who knows what else. But for the moment, It's great to be with you virtually.
Well, thank you. And actually, one of my dreams is the Muse cruise. Have a like a special cruise thing where we have like a MuseScore workshop or something in there. That's like a little dream someday.
Sounds good. Sign me up.
All right. So Philip, so I've got like a handful of things to ask you, and then we can just chat about whatever. But I think the first thing is I'd like you to describe, well, what it is that you do, so people have a better sense of who you are than whatever I just said.
Sure. No, I heard everything you said, and it's quite accurate. I am a music copyist and engraver, music preparer in New York City. That is not the entire story, but it's certainly one of the main lines of work that I do. In terms of my background, I have a degree, several degrees in music composition, and I have a bachelor's degree from Rice University in Texas. Shout out to anyone in Texas that is watching, and then a master's degree from Juilliard, and I came to New York City in 1998, and I've been here ever since. And what I found is that I've composed for any number of different pieces and types of compositions, types of ensembles. And I enjoyed it, and I still enjoy it, but I'm not really doing that much original composition these days. And what I found, I really enjoyed not just the composition process, but the act of preparing the music for performance. I took real pleasure in laying the music out, properly. Choices of fonts, choices of different notational options, and I started with Finale 2.0. That was my first
Oh, you beat
software.
me
Yeah,
then.
back in
That was
1990,
3 point something.
1994, 1995. And in addition to enjoying the other things that the other elements of composition, I also enjoyed the technological part of it. And what happened was I started really enjoying like the elements of looking into the finale manual and understanding kind of the guts behind how the software worked and what did you need to do in order to make a particular page look the way it did, and what was the process by which the software generated parts. And I remember being up all night, or I went to sleep, but leaving the computer on all night to extract parts because that's what you
Oh,
had to
yeah.
do. That was, I mean, but even that like was still much faster. Think of the comparison between that and the act of hand copying
Oh, yeah.
all the parts out, which I started before I remember thinking about like there's got to be. I remember in school thinking about a word processor for music. Like I didn't even know what it was called. I was I used word processors to type up my papers, but I was thinking like there's got to be something for music, and that's what I first learned about Finale. And then even after I had hand copied out an entire orchestra piece and all the parts, and then I was like, wow, this is so amazing, and I was hooked. And ever since then, it has been kind of the marriage of music preparation. I'm so sorry. I have it looks like a call that someone keeps trying to
Okay.
call me, and I'm just gonna keep silencing it.
Okay.
Um, um, but what has happened is the marriage of music technology and the music notation has kind of been my sweet spot, and I found that overall what I took pleasure in was that little intersection. And it's interesting how something that when you're in school you don't even realize like what you're in, that's your interest, and then it has kind of set the course from that point on, and to the point where fast forward 20, 30 years, and this is where I find myself now, not only for a living preparing music, orchestrating music, arranging it, doing all those things, but the technological side, as well as learning the old school craft. And I don't
Mm.
know if your viewers can see, probably not so well behind me, but I have a binding machine, a paper folding machine, two
Oh, wow.
large size heavy duty printers, a electric saddle stapler, all in a relatively small New York City
Mm.
office space. And so it's definitely a craft that goes back many years, and yet we're
Right.
still moving forward on the technological front. So it's that is kind of in a nutshell what I do, and I prepare music for all types of ensembles, all types of clients. They can be rather small projects, they can be large opera projects, film projects, commercial projects,
Mm.
or orchestra music, you name it. And it's just something that people always ask me, like, how do I get into the business and how do I start
I was
doing it? It's
going
like,
to ask you about that because I know any number of our viewers would be interested in that.
sure, yeah, no, it's a great question. And yeah, there's really no formal training as far as I know. I try to do
Right.
workshops when I can. I know you're involved with teaching the elements of MuseScore and related things as well. So there are resources out there that we didn't have. I didn't certainly have. Certainly not easily available. But what I tell people is just do it and learn. I mean, and there's no substitute for really learning both the craft the rules of notation, why things are done a certain way, and the tech itself. I mean, we didn't have Elaine Gould's Behind Bars book. If anyone doesn't know that book, I highly recommend you pick it up either
Yeah, me too.
digitally, iBooks or Kindle, or certainly the hard copy. It's funny, I have literally, 10 feet away from me, I've got the hard copy version on my shelf, but there you go. So, but more often I have it on my Apple Books account as well, and I'll pull it up on the screen, and I refer to it many times a day.
Yeah, I have the Kindle version too.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that, but there's also other resources. There's even a little pocket resource that Alfred puts out, which is a pretty good resource. There's the Gardner Reed music notation reference and others. So there's no substitute for that. Certainly, you can waste so much time, with all respect to our friends on the Facebook forums and other social media. Like, so often I see a question posed on a forum, whether it be about music engraving or whether it be about, the text, Sibelius, MuseScore, Dorico, Finale. And it could, 30 replies and snarky comments later, maybe you get a halfway decent answer. Whereas, if you just actually looked it up in the official reference, you could have found the actual answer. And the problem is, I think the impediment, is that often people don't know what something is called. Like, they may not
That
know
is
that
often an
something
issue.
in MuseScore it's called a spacer, or in Finale it's in page layout, and you want to know, like, how do I move the system a certain amount without disrupting all the other systems? And that is something where, like, a human to human question probably is valuable, as long as people are providing the right answer. Unfortunately, a lot of times people provide the incorrect answer, and that is something I think is a little bit that I, to my dismay, always puts the conversation. I'm all about efficiency when I do this sort of stuff. So any inefficiencies that I see in gathering information and learning is always a little disheartening. But look, we all learn, we all make mistakes, and we move forward. So, but what I would say to people is, just do the work. What I did when I first started out, and I had used Finale for about 10 years or so, and then I first got into Sibelius around 2004, 2005. And it was a project, it was an orchestration project, actually. And the other orchestrator was using Sibelius, and I was the more junior orchestrator. And I was told that, sure, I could use I could use Finale if I wanted to, and that would have been fine. But I didn't want to, like, rock the boat. I didn't want to create problems in the music prep side of things, because then they would have had to have another copyist, or maybe things wouldn't have gone as smoothly. It wasn't a problem with Finale itself. It was just like that project was already using Sibelius. So why, especially in 2005, when Music XML was not as reliable as it is now, and all these other things, why rock the boat? So I remember I was in the commissary of the Metropolitan Opera, because I was working on an opera at that time as a music preparer. And I just took the Sibelius, I think the Sibelius 4 manual it might have been, and just brought, that was my reading material at every chance I got, at lunch breaks, snack breaks, coffee breaks. I took it and just read it cover to cover, and got up to speed as quickly as possible, and then did the work, and I did the project. Certainly with took me a lot more time and a lot more technical mistakes than I would make now, but just do it, and continue to learn and stretch. That is the only way to do it and get ahead.
Where would you say, like, your clients mostly were coming from, in, like, especially in the early days?
My clients were mostly coming from really the world of other composers, publishers. It was a it was a mix, and my very earliest clients were literally colleagues of mine, like other students, quite honestly, who kind of knew that, hey, Phil has a kind of a little maybe unhealthy obsession with the look of the music and all this stuff, but we should exploit that and get him to work on things for us. So that was fun. And I remember doing some jobs for friends of mine, and to who actually are still, many of them are still now, as their careers have taken off, are clients of mine to this day. And that's another thing I would say is like, it's a lot about relationships. It's all about, treating people how you'd like to be treated, doing the work, doing it on time, being respectful. I've certainly made mistakes. I'd be the first to admit that I could have maybe replied to something in a different way or done something different. It's all about learning. And, and then, ultimately what I look for now that I hire people, because I hire many people on my team to do work, and it depends on what the nature of the project is. What I'm ultimately looking for is just someone to be communicative, direct, do good work. If they make a mistake, that's okay. Just own it and learn from it, and take good direction. And
All right.
yeah, so that's the thing. It's, I think, if I forget who said, but 90% of success is showing up, and it's certainly true in this business. Like,
Yeah.
I realized basically when I started doing this full time was that, a lot of composers do it as a sideline, like, oh, I'll copy somebody's music, and then until I get my next commission, and then I'll flake out. And I realized that there was actually a need for someone to, be there day in and day out if somebody needed work. And then I started doing it. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, you mentioned switching over to Sibelius for that one project, and that's probably as good an opportunity as any to sort of navigate over to the subject of the Sibelius blog and how you became involved with that and how it's evolved.
Yeah. So basically what happened was, in the interest of furthering knowledge and furthering people's understanding of the of the software and of the the technology, I started, I think it might have been in 2000, and I can't remember when I first posted my first video online, but it was maybe in 2010, maybe about 10 years ago now. And at that time I was using both Finale and Sibelius, and I was beta testing Sibelius, and I got to know Daniel Spreadberry, who a lot of people watching this will probably know. He is now the product marketing manager at Dorico, but has a tremendous reputation in the field as a leader in our industry. And but I hadn't, I never really.
Sibelius at the time.
He was at Sibelius at the time. That's right. This is well before Dorico was, even a thing. And so anyway, I was making videos, and I was just kind of putting them out there, like, here's how to, mass apply dynamics in Sibelius or Finale. Here's how to whatever. And I'd done a few of those, and I think I came to Daniel's attention both as a beta tester and also just as someone who had had an interest beyond just doing the work, but also putting knowledge out there for other people to learn from. And then, as a lot of people know in the industry, Avid went through a lot of corporate changes in 2012. Consequence of that was that most of the development team, Sibelius development team, was let go. Fortunately for them, Steinberg picked them up, and that was the genesis of how Dorico started. But at the time, Daniel had also had, in addition to like the official Avid communication channels, he also had started the Sibelius blog in 2008, and he was writing articles, posting videos about how to use Sibelius, other tips and tricks, and it was an unofficial, even though it was kind of semi-official because he was a Sibelius employee, Avid employee, but it was not kind of part of the official communications, and it was a great way to communicate kind of in a free way with users. And of course, when he was made clear that he was no longer going to be with Sibelius, he reached out and he said, look, I have this blog. Of course I knew about it, and he said, I don't really know what to do, but I know it's not going to be appropriate for me to continue with it, obviously. Would you consider, taking it on? And, I mean, even though I had done a few videos and a few other things, I'd never blogged before. I never used WordPress or anything like that. And I said, look, I think it's a great resource. What I will do is I will take over the administration of it. I will pay the hosting bill. At a bare minimum, I'll make sure that the lights stay on and the articles are archived, and it's a resource for people. And but then what I found is like, this is a really great way to get information out there. A lot of times I will, I wanted to document something that I had found out how to do a tip or a trick, and I would write it up really more for myself, just to like look, so I don't forget how to do this. And then, but it would be there for. I was like, well, everybody else should know how to do this. And what happened was over time, because I started using, I was using certainly Finale at that time, and I remember meeting Tomas and Nicholas, and started, playing around with MuseScore a little bit and doing some
Who were
other
two
things.
of the founding members of the MuseScore company, for people who don't know the names.
Yes. Yep, Tomas Bonte and Nicholas Fromont.
Fromont. I don't really speak French, but
I know
our
French
T don't come out. And Werner Schwer is the other, the third member of the original team.
Yeah, but I had met Tomas and Nicholas. I forget when, but it was quite. I mean, they came to New York, and we had a nice lunch. And we talked for many hours. I remember about what MuseScore was and all that. This was long ago, and so certainly it's been on my radar for a long time. But anyway, so what I'm trying to say is that my interest in the field was broader than just Sibelius. Indeed, I was still really using Finale at least half the time, if not more, than Sibelius, certainly at that time. And so then I started posting some stuff about Finale and some other things, and I think it was a little confused. There was a disconnect at first, and people were like, well, wait a second, I thought this was the Sibelius blog, and I kind of had to explain to readers and all that. And I remember actually when Finale also had kind of a restructuring in their corporate world, and
they're now based about 10 miles from me.
Okay, right, yeah. So now they're in Boulder, in the Denver area, and they used to be in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. And the new CEO, we had breakfast in New York, and he says, "I love your content." Because he did not come from the music notation world.
Right.
They came from like the endurance training. Peak Square is the name of the company. Yeah. And he said, I really, have read a number of your articles on your blog and getting up to speed on the nature of the industry. But would you ever consider changing the name? And he was he was half joking, obviously. I mean, in his interest and their interest, obviously, to call it Sibelius blog when it was covering more than just Sibelius, it was a valid point. And he was not the only person to say that. But so long story short, I have
to imagine a number. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, well, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, I have to imagine a number of the readers would have been thinking, well, what's going on with Daniel and that new adventure that he's doing, this Dorico thing. So, people would want to know about that.
So exactly. So that's what happened. In fact, when I started covering Dorico, and he actually officially announced it to the world, and we were both in Finland for the MOLA conference. MOLA is the Major Orchestra Librarians Association conference, and it happened to be in Helsinki, Finland. And in May 2016, even though people knew that Steinberg was working on this product, the name and the plans had not ever been officially announced, and was announced during that conference as Dorico. And we had that was one of the biggest traffic days on the blog. It was still Sibelius blog at that time. And at that point, really, I realized that, basically, like, this is really an industry blog now. It is not just, it's an industry resource. It's not just Sibelius. And so I went on a rebranding mission and worked with an agency who also redesigned my NYC Music Services website, which you see up. I've seen people. I don't know if people can actually see this.
I have. I don't have your screen up right now, but
that's okay. Yeah, that's all right.
I want to put the link to NYC Music Services.
Yep. So basically, concurrently with one another, and the NYC Music Services site was relaunched and redone, and the scoring notes was Sibelius. The Sibelius blog transitioned from that to scoring notes, and it was also completely rebranded, redesigned. Everything, even though all the articles, all the links, all remained. Everything going back to 2008, when if you search the blog for anything written prior to 2012, the author will still be Daniel. It'll still be listed as Daniel Spreadbury. So it maintains. It's really, it has quite a history now of about
Yeah.
almost 12 years, and I'm very proud of it. It's it's still funny. It's still kind of a side thing because if there's not a lot of money, I'll have to say, in music notation vlogging. So you have to really love it. You have to be passionate about it, and it is more about really a community resource, and that's why I do try to as I have developed some other things, like we'll talk about Notation Express and such. I mean, I have used it to put the word out about that because it is a blog that is part of NYC Music Services, and I do use it that way. But I also really try my best to maintain an independent voice, and cover the field as best we can, given the the small world that we live in.
Yeah, and it's a fine line we all walk. I mean, in the same way that you say, the blog isn't necessarily a sustaining business. Neither is doing a cafe, but it's a thing that we do because it's something that you believe is valuable, and then you hope that everything just sort of works out in the world where things do what they need to do, and that is a perfectly good opportunity to segue now to talking about what Notation Express actually is here. Before we do, though, I just want to say out loud one of the questions that came in. People who are seeing it on the chat know it's just a question about behind bars and the fact that there are translations, at least a German translation. But if anyone's hearing this who didn't see that on the chat, we're wondering about the quality of the German translation. If anyone has heard anything about it, I haven't. What I have heard people saying is, well, go ahead and at least do the electronic version because it's cheaper, and then if you don't like it, you would be happier. If anyone has any better information, feel free to chime in on the chat. All right. Okay. Yeah. So Notation Express is this you can explain better than anyone else what it is, but it's pretty cool is what I can say. So Phil, what's Notation Express?
Let's talk about it. So
to flip over now to where the screen is, so people will see what we're talking about.
Okay, and I'll get these. These where you can see the I just have these up. NYC Music Services, and this is the blog post that we actually, when we announced Notation Express for MuseScore. So you can check that out, and if you want to provide a link to that as well, that would be just fine. But and the site, if you want to actually get Notation Express, it's just simply notationexpress.com. All right. So what is this thing? Basically, so what? I'll try to be brief about the backstory. So there's this thing called a Stream Deck, and it is a pretty small. You can see it kind of fits in the palm of your hand. It mostly, you put it on it comes with a stand, but I'm just holding it up right now, and it's intended for gamers. Okay, and I don't know a thing about the world of gaming, but apparently, you push the buttons and it controls your live streams, and it controls all these things having to do with online gaming, computer gaming, and so on and so forth. But really, what it is a series of interactive buttons that will change based on context, and they're actually physical buttons. They have
hold on, Philip. We're getting some feedback here, and I'm going to. So I'm going to mute the audio on. I have your microphone on twice here, apparently.
Okay.
All right, talk.
Okay.
Can you talk, Philip?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Is it better? Not better. It is better or not better?
No.
Okay.
Let me flip over here a second. So over here, it's okay.
So should I talk some more? Is that okay or not so good?
Feels like it's still not so good, huh?
Should I switch my microphone? Should I try that?
Let me mute my own mic.
Okay.
See if that's part of the problem. All right, Philip, try talking some more.
Okay. How's this? Is this any better? On the feedback?
Sounds better to me.
Okay.
Distorted. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Let me see if it's a mic issue on my end. I'll switch to my internal mic. How's that? Is that coming across any better? Can you hear me better or worse, or about the same?
I hear it's a bit better, but I don't know if that came in before or after your actual switch. What does anyone else think? Better. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Because I muted myself. Yeah. Let me unmute myself. All right. And now can you hear me? I just unmuted myself. Okay. So yeah, this mic is quieter, but it's working.
Okay. And
so now let me switch.
And you can hear me as well now? That's working okay?
I can hear you fine, Philip. How about others? All right. I think maybe we're good.
Okay, fine. All right. Yeah, that's just, I was using another external mic and switched to the iMac mic. So
Okay.
we'll do our best. Anyway, long story short, so, actually someone from Elgato, which is the company that makes this, sent me a couple of these because of the blog. They said, oh, this could be, we think this, you could use this in music notation land. And I was like, okay. And then they sent it to me almost 2 years ago now. And it sat on my shelf for almost a year because I opened it up and I said, well, I don't know what to do with this. And I know all my shortcuts in Sibelius and so on. And what do I need this for? And
now, was that what you're holding up? Was that the physical Stream Deck?
That was the physical Stream Deck, yeah.
That is it in your hand right now?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
And so then I got word of a Dorico user actually who had started using this to control Dorico. He started programming Dorico shortcuts and commands and macros, into the software that accompanies it. And that was interesting. And actually, his name is Dan Kreider, and he actually wrote up a little review of it on Scoring Notes, just how he was using it to customize his own workflow. And then David Newman, the accomplished film composer, conductor, film music composer and conductor. I've worked with him on several projects. He contacted me and said, hey, I'd like to, I've heard about this thing. Some of the guys in LA are using it, and they have kind of programmed their own way, and I would love to use it with Sibelius. And can you make me basically a profile to help me work with Sibelius? And I was like, okay, sure, I will play around with this and see what I can do. And in I don't know, maybe a day or so, I had kind of a prototype working where I was just kind of grabbing some, taking screenshots of icons and programming some key commands into it. And he loved it. Like, he was like, this is amazing. And because what you have to understand, and I imagine some people watching are in this camp as well, maybe you're not in the software every day. You have an active life, you have an active musical life, you're using, other programs, sequencers, you're doing other things, you're teaching all day, you're whatever it is that you're doing. And not everyone is like in the software for 8 hours, 10 hours a day and really memorizing all the key commands or where things are. So for someone like that, for someone like David Newman, who was a, very accomplished person, and then he would not be working in Sibelius for months, and then all of a sudden need to work on a score and be into it. And it's like, how do I put in a dynamic? How do I change this or that? Having something like this was really kind of unlocked so much productivity, because you could just, you say, oh, I just need a dynamic. Okay, this is how I put in a dynamic. I just need to put in articulation. I don't need to worry about fiddling with where it is on the keypad, or how do I put in tempo text. And you can, hopefully your viewers can see, on the screen, the Stream Deck software is mimicking what I'm doing here as well on the deck. And so then I was like, you know what, there's something here. Let me go down the rabbit hole, as I, in my compulsive nature, I sometimes do. And I say, look, let me see if I can basically, build this out as something that would have more mass appeal. And then so I really took care in designing the icons, thinking about the layout, the workflow, and all of that. And I designed it for Sibelius. And it's interesting because ultimately what happened, what ended up happening is that people found it very useful. And then I built it out, and I had a lot of help from a very talented fellow by the name of Leo Nicholson, who helped develop it out for Dorico. And like I'll show you, like this is you'll notice like between the Sibelius, this is the main screen, the main 15 button layout. Right now I'm in the Sibelius layout, and the buttons are, the layout is pretty similar. There are
And one thing I should point out is what we're seeing in the upper left of your computer screen. That's the actual app on your computer,
that's
right?
exactly
And
right.
it's sort of connected.
You buy this and then you download the software for free, the desktop software for free, which helps you actually control all everything. But what you find is that you're working on these types of things, and it you don't have to really think about so much like, how do I do this in Dorico? So if I switch to the Dorico profile again, certain things are a little bit different. Obviously, you have the modes, setup mode, write mode, engrave, play, and print, which you don't have in the other software. Certain things are called different things, but broadly speaking, it's laid out similarly. Like in Dorico considers clefs and octaves to be the same thing. Okay, like if you put an ottava line, an octave line in a score, it considers that more or less to be kind of like a clef change.
Okay.
And it kind of made sense to me. And so even though MuseScore and Sibelius don't do it that way, I was like, that makes sense. Okay. And so I organized it the same way. And if you're thinking that way, then it's like, okay, that's cool. So it's not necessarily organized the same way. The palettes might be organized in MuseScore, or the ribbon might be organized in Sibelius. But
And I don't know about Sibelius, but in MuseScore you could totally customize your workspaces and so forth to have it be that way.
So, and then basically what happens when you get Notation Express, when you buy it, Notation Express is the profile. It's basically two things, really. It is the Stream Deck profile, and all you have to do is basically you double click on a profile file, and it just, all this stuff just loads up into Stream Deck. You don't have to do anything more. All behind the scenes, it's firing a whole bunch of commands that sometimes it's a keyboard shortcut. In the case of MuseScore, a lot of the times it's a sequence of commands that end up resulting in applying a clef, for instance. But you don't have to worry about that. It's all programmed in there, hundreds of commands. And then the other thing it does is that, the installers, there's basically an installer for each of MuseScore, Dorico, and Finale, and it drops into place in basically your application support folder. In the case of MuseScore, basically two files: a key command file, shortcut file, which is in here, and these are basically, it just builds on the default MuseScore shortcuts. So if you're already using default MuseScore shortcuts, those have not changed. I worked with those as much as I could, and then I added a whole bunch of them. But then, of course, in MuseScore, not everything is controlled via keyboard shortcut. So the other thing it does is it drops into place a MuseScore workspace. It's called Notation Express, and all you have to do after you run the installer on Mac or Windows is basically just switch to that Notation Express workspace, and it will basically look the same as the advanced workspace, because that's what I built it on, but the properties of all the different items are renamed so that Notation Express, the Stream Deck, can find them very easily, and that's how it works. So maybe I could just give you a little demo and show you how.
Please do.
Yeah. Okay. So again, and by the way, if you don't have a Stream Deck, the Stream Deck, depending on where you are, I forget exactly what it costs, $100 or $150. There's also the Stream Deck app, which is for iPhone only. It's not for Android, I'm afraid. But this is something that Elgato makes. It's a subscription app. You have to subscribe. I think it's like $3 a month or $25 a year. But it's if you think about the productivity that you get, and all the same things happen. In fact, maybe I can demo on the iPhone to just start, like how you might be working. For instance, like if I wanted to put, say, a dynamic on this note.
This is my phone, by the way, with it loaded.
Yep. And it just connects via Wi-Fi. So if I'm putting a dynamic and I just hit the F, this is a very simple thing, but it just does that. If I want to put in a crescendo, you just tap and it does it. And obviously, if you're doing it on more than one staff at once, obviously MuseScore can do that for you. These are very simple things, but let's just try some articulations. If I wanted to put, say, accents or staccato or tenuto, again, you don't have to remember the shortcuts. You just hit the button. Marcato, even things like up bow, down bow all work. Even things like fermatas, which are not, those are applied via the palette. There's no shortcut for it. I programmed them in as well. And you might notice it just takes like a second longer because it is running through the macro on the palette, but that also puts those in there as well. So
and for people who are watching, I mean, a lot of things that everything about what we're doing right now is a little bit magic. I mean, we're Philip's sitting in New York, I'm sitting in Colorado. We're broadcasting something on a video. You're seeing two different cameras and a screen. It might be a little hard to wrap your brain about what's actually happening, but really it is. You're sitting here holding this device in your phone, looking at your score on the computer, and you hit a button here on your device, and right there on your screen, it's just as if you had clicked on the palette, except now you're doing it from your device.
Exactly, and again, the point is, it's here. I'm putting in a tenor clef on the bassoon, for instance, the point, or if let's put in a, you wouldn't maybe do this on a clarinet, but sure, you could put an octave line, and there it is. Techniques all work. If I wanted to put, let's actually do this on a string part, say, put in pizzicato and arco. This is a little artificial, but just say pizzicato, and there it is, or arco, and do that. But what I have found, and I'll show some of the other things as well, is that if you're switching between programs on a regular basis, and you can't, like each of the programs do things in a different way. Like if you're in Sibelius, you apply clefs in a different way, but you don't have to worry about it. You can here I'll switch. Let me switch on my phone to the Sibelius Profile. And yeah, so now I've just switched just like that to the Sibelius Profile. And if I wanted to put in a clef in Sibelius, it just puts it in. Whoops, I got to make sure Sibelius is obviously in the foreground. But I just hit that, and I put in my clefs, or I put in the bass clef, whatever the case may be. And I don't have to think about it. I hit the button. Where are the articulations? It doesn't matter. I can just put in a whole bunch of articulations in Sibelius, and they'll show up on the screen. In Sibelius, we actually have this thing where you can get rid of all the articulations at once. But even some of the more features like bar lines, repeats, that sort of thing. Here I'm in Sibelius, and I'm putting in say a start repeat. I'll put that here, and I'll put an end repeat, and I don't have to remember like, where is that in the ribbon? How do I get there? How do I put in a first ending? How do I put in a second ending, and then say, oh, now I need to go to MuseScore because I need to work in that software. And it's like, oh, okay, I need to do that. Now I need to put in, I need to do the same thing in MuseScore. It's in the same place on the phone. We just hit bar and bar lines, and here's some of the same stuff. It's in here. It's in repeats, and I just hit a start repeat, and it just shows up in MuseScore. I don't have to worry about it. Here, put an end repeat, and there it is. And I can do all sorts of things like, I don't know, if I want to insert a bar, I don't have to remember what that command is like. I just click here, and I hit the insert bar thing, and there it is. I want to add a dashed bar or a dotted bar line, and I just hit that, and it does it. And I think for people that are working, whether you're working just in MuseScore or you're working in various programs, I haven't shown Dorico, but trust me, it's the same. Whoops, I zoomed in a little too much there. But it's the same concept. You can just kind of see like, oh, let me switch to Dorico, and now let me go back to here, and I'll just do the same thing. I have my dashed bar line or a dotted bar line, or a double bar line, and just put it in, and it just shows up. And it's that type of fluency where I was thinking, wait, how do I do that in Dorico? I have to pop over. It's this, it's that, it's the other thing.
This is gonna be a lifesaver if you do work with multiple programs, for sure.
Whether you work on one or the other, here I'll just put in another clef change, and I just did it in Dorico, and it just did it. And because it knows how to function that way. So that was the revelation for me was like, yeah, in Sibelius I knew that I had my Control Alt 1 Shift was something. Most people just can't remember what that shortcut is, or where in the ribbon or the menu it is, and then you spend like a minute trying to, and then that's just time, and it's unnecessary, I feel. I mean, sure, if you're only working in one program and you're in it all day, it is faster to use just the keyboard and not have to push a button somewhere. But you really kind of have to know what you're doing there. So,
and actually,
yeah,
if you don't mind me
please, yeah,
interjecting a moment, if people sometimes try to use MuseScore like on, say, like a Microsoft Surface,
yeah,
a key, something that's a touch screen that has a keyboard, but maybe your keyboard's not always attached,
right,
or in the case of like people in a classroom situation, when there's these things called smart boards that are like giant,
right,
huge screen TVs that are touch screen and have no physical keyboard at all.
right.
And I did a little demo. You may have, people watching the cafe may have seen a few months ago, where I was on a smart board and I'm sitting here like, operating the, here's the palettes over here and there's the toolbar up there, and
Right.
I'm like jumping all over the place to actually, and it's sort of acrobatic and interesting, I guess. But I think if I were trying to do that on a smart board, I would be doing that with this
Right.
for my palettes and so forth, and touch the board maybe for entering the notes, and do this for everything else.
Exactly. So, and the other thing to keep in mind, I mean, I should mention that it will not replace your MIDI keyboard or your computer keyboard. It does not have every last function programmed into it. That would just be impossible to do. There are thousands of them, when you think about all the different permutations. So yeah, you are going to, did I program a quadruple dot in here? No, you get, especially on the limit of the 15 key layout, there's only a single, I'm talking about like an augmentation dot. Like if you need a
Right.
double dotted note, yeah, you're going to have to still apply that kind of the old fashioned way.
This is also customizable, right?
So that's the thing. When you purchase Notation Express, the profile, that's $29.99, I think. You basically download it, and then you can use your license. Basically allows you to customize it however you like. You can make multiple copies of profiles. You can have one profile for you can easily drag and drop these icons. You can customize them under the hood. You could program the hotkeys differently, however you like. And if you ever needed to restore the default, you would just kind of double click the file that was in your installer again, and you can have multiple profiles. In fact, I have look, you can have on the Stream Deck. There's also something called the XL, which is a 32 key layout, which I haven't built out for MuseScore yet, but maybe in time. But look, I can have both of these going simultaneously on different screens, and have them both doing two different things. I don't have multiple hands to kind of show you how that works, but suffice it to say, like if I'm in MuseScore and I'm doing different things, like if I'm doing note input on the one hand, or articulations, and I'm using this to put in articulations, and I put in some accents, and now I don't even know what I'm typing here, but I'll put in a clef. And the deck, and or you had multiple decks going on. I mean, you can trick this out however you wanted, and I don't care. You can do this. The only thing I say is that you cannot share that with other people unless they have bought it as well. And I'm just kind of operating on a little bit of a trust issue. That okay, look, if someone else, you got to buy it. You got to buy the Notation Express, and then you can do whatever you want. For $29, you can then customize it however you like, and you can run it on multiple. It's not limited to one computer. You can run. The license basically says it's limited to you as a single user for as many computers or devices as you like to run it on. So there's that's no problem. You have a laptop and you have a desktop. That's fine. And the other thing I wanted to just show is that there are certainly there's definitely some MuseScore specific things in here that aren't in the other programs. Like for instance, I've even kind of appropriated the MuseScore icons if you're switching between note input mode or repitch mode or insert mode. I don't know if you can see, it might be a little small on the screen, but that's the little icon on the left, that is switching as I touch these. So that, you can switch between the different modes on here without having to grab the mouse if you like. Certainly like basic things like if you're moving a note, a semitone up or down, you might just forget if you're not used to working in the software on a regular basis what those shortcuts are. Note heads, there's quite a number of different note heads that are programmed in here. If you're switching to a cross note head, for instance, and you just tap that. The other thing that MuseScore is kind of MuseScore specific is this visibility and formatting area. And MuseScore calls things different than some other programs. So, or in some cases, it does things differently than some other programs. So, like the concept of the spacers is something that is not really quite the same thing in Finale. Or, I mean, in those other programs, you kind of drag the staff more or less. In MuseScore, like if you want to apply a spacer, so I tap that, and now I've got the spacer that I can use to apply the space. The concept of the the horizontal frame or the vertical frame is, Dorico has frames, but it's not quite the same as MuseScore. But I can apply that here, and in MuseScore, as you can see now, I've got that frame I can work with. I can apply a text frame, and I just tap that, and I've got obviously that caused the music to go off the screen.
It's on the next page.
It's on the next page, right? Of course. So, but you kind of get the basic idea of how that would work. So yeah, even things like these little page break icons. So if you want to, there's a whole view area. Like if I want to show MuseScore calls them unprintables, which I think is a great name. So I can, tap that on and off, and if your viewers can see all those little icons will, hide or show. So just a way of, displaying. In MuseScore, it's called continuous view. In Finale, it's called scroll view. In Dorico, it's called galley view. And in Sibelius, it's called panorama. It's the same thing. It's functionally the same. It's just a scroll basically. So there's a little toggle there that so you don't have to think about it. And that's in all the different Dorico and Sibelius and MuseScore versions. I've called it what it is in the specific program, but it's all basically in that same place. So,
any thoughts of doing a Finale version, or is there technical issues there?
Yeah, so basically, there's some guys that are working on that, that are involved with it. I'm not really involved with it, and their efforts are pretty substantial. But to my knowledge, they haven't actually released anything yet, and the issue really ultimately a couple of things. One, the way Finale is designed, it's so heavily dependent on the dialog boxes and clicking in check boxes and multiple nested dialogues. It's just an artifact of the fact that it was it's the oldest of all these programs really, and that's the way you did things when you designed software in the late 1980s, early 1990s. And it still functions more or less that way. The other thing is that there is no way in Finale to create a custom shortcut profile that is global. Like you can create certain what are called meta tools with it, but those are document specific. So there's there's nothing equivalent to basically this window in Finale or this. What is effectively the same.
Or the workspace even.
Yeah, or the workspace. Well, yeah, there's kind of something like that, but not quite the same. And but here you can see like all these are all the keyboard shortcuts in Sibelius. Same thing in Dorico. These are broadly equivalent, and you can customize these things in these three programs. Whereas in Finale, there's no equivalent of this, and this is kind of really the secret sauce. In addition to programming a lot of the macros and all the steps, and I I basically decided that was not something that I'm still thinking about like how it could be done, but like I said, there's another group of guys that are working on that, and I certainly I wish them all the best, and hopefully that they'll come out with something that will be able to work. But yeah.
Well, that's really nice, and I'm looking to see if anyone has any questions for Philip about this. By all means, put them in the chat here. Meanwhile, though, just talking about the various different programs out there, I definitely want to just hear if you have any thoughts about just general trends in music notation software. You mentioned like dialogue boxes, or that's so 80s and 90s. It's not quite how you put it, but that's how I perceive it.
Yeah.
Any just thoughts on the future of music notation software, or any thoughts of that nature?
Yeah, sure. It was very interesting going to NAMM, the NAMM show in Anaheim, California last month. I've been out there the past 4 years, and it's a real great experience to talk with lots of people in the industry. Certainly, I've met with representatives of all four major desktop products. The Finale folks were great. I spoke with Daniel Ray, who's on the MuseScore team. Spoke with Sam Butler from Avid. I spoke with Daniel actually via Skype because he was in Austria during NAMM, but also spoke at length with John Barron, who was out at NAMM. And so I really, it was great to talk to them. They're all doing tremendous work, and I think each product has its own particular set of strengths. People always ask me, what product should I use? And I don't have a good answer because they're quite honestly, they're all good for what they do. And MuseScore, of course, being free and open source, has positives and negatives. There are two sides of a coin there. Having proprietary software is, there are drawbacks and positives as well. So it's a very interesting time in the field to see where each of the products have kind of carving out their own little space. But you can see, like, broadly speaking, this is just a little bit of a test example, obviously, but this is the same piece in all three programs. They all look pretty similar. In fact, I think I might be using a combination of the Bravura font here and some of the MuseScore fonts. But you can make the music look pretty similar in all three products. The workflow is different among all three, certainly. Dorico has the definite advantage, I would say, of being the newest product and therefore less burdened by the technical debt that plagues a lot of the other software. You have to try to maintain, to a certain extent, file compatibility, and there's legacy decisions that we made. I know you guys are working.
That limits us a lot, for sure.
Yeah, and you guys are working certainly on the design side and other things. But one encouraging trend, I would say, certainly with MuseScore and Sibelius, is the focus on accessibility. And Sam Butler from Avid made a really good point to me last month. And also Kevin Gibbs, who is a Sibelius user.
Right.
He and I chatted. He was out there in person, and we spoke for quite a bit. And they made the point that accessibility, basically meaning like sight impaired users navigating the software basically without the aid of a mouse, in some cases without the aid of being able to see the screen at all, or having very limited field of vision. And they said accessibility is not just about them; it's about everyone. If you make the software accessible in that way, then it will benefit everyone. And case in point, like, I think it was really the accessibility improvements that you guys made with the palettes, with some of the things, that really unlocked the kind of the hurdle to making Notation Express work, because it basically it doesn't know where your mouse is. It doesn't use the mouse at all when it controls. It is just basically accessing things via keyboard, keyboard shortcuts and other things. So that was really quite
it was a usage we had no concept of as we were developing the accessibility thing, but yeah, it makes some really amazing things possible.
Yeah, and they made the point quite clearly, like, it's not a niche thing. You can't think of it as just benefiting a small subset of users. It's going to benefit everyone. And sure, yeah. I think one of the nice things about all of these softwares is
Absolutely.
you have met multiple ways of getting the music in. You can, if you want to, you can click in every note with a mouse, and some people like to just prefer that. They think it's the most natural way. It's certainly the slowest way of getting music in, but whatever. I mean, every user is going to use it a different way. But yeah, in terms of the general trends, I know that the Finale folks are making a lot of strides in that legacy code base. I think it has been a focus of what they've been doing over the last year or two, and certainly you have to do that in order to move the product forward, and also to maintain compatibility with the newest operating systems. And
right.
so it's an exciting time. You know, we were in a little bit of a dormant period, I feel, in the early part of last decade, where, you know, like I said earlier, when the Sibelius team was let go and there was a lot of transition going on, a lot of product, stasis, really. Same thing with it just happens when you make big structural.
We didn't know if Finale or Sibelius were going to survive.
Yeah, and there were a lot of rumors flying around. But when you make big structural changes, on a corporate or organization level, you're just going to disrupt the development process for a certain amount of time, and that's what happened. But I think we're back in the golden age. If you, and then of course, look at all the ex-Sibelius people that landed at Dorico have made really a beautiful product. I mean, it looks, I would say, of all the products, Dorico looks the nicest, both in terms of the interface and in terms of the quality of the default quality of the output. Anyway, I mean, I think you can get there with some of the other products, but it takes more time. I think something that they have really emphasized is getting Dorico to look as good as possible with minimum.
Yeah, and I still haven't installed like the demo or reduced version, whatever, but it's on my list of things to start playing with.
Yeah. So that, and also, look, I mean, there are a number of Dorico only unique features. The condensing one being the main one that was introduced in Dorico 3, where two staves will all automatically condense into one. If you're doing like a conductor score or something like that.
Combining flute staves into one, you mean, that kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. Certainly the play mode, which is something unique to Dorico, where it's more or less like a DAW-like representation of the music in your sequencer. I mean, in your notation software, and you can draw automation curves and do all these other things. So you can play around with the note length in what is effectively like a piano roll, separate from, and it will not affect the music notation. So that is a really really important innovation. So everybody's doing great work. It's exciting, but I'm not going to recommend one software or another, because every user is different, and I think you can get results in all of them. And I just worked on a big Finale project that wrapped up at the end of last year. It was a big opera. It was 10 scenes, 2.5 hour, 10 big scenes of music, 2.5 hours worth of music, and we did it all in Finale 26, and it went well. So yeah, it's and basically I think that's why I also realized that Notation Express was a a viable product, whether you're using one software or many software. Like, I can't keep all the shortcuts for Dorico, and it's just impossible. So but
yeah, and I can imagine that being especially useful for like educators, people because I'm often having to deal with multiple programs because I'm teaching students who are using different programs and so forth. So I'm fairly useless with anything except MuseScore at this point. But I used to know Finale pretty well, but that's just brain can only hold so much information.
And really, do you want to be, like I said, talking about Dave Newman, do you want to be spending he's got better things to do, and most people do, than, remembering that Alt Control F8 does something. It's just,
exactly.
There's only so much time, you want to spend remembering that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you or your users might have, whether it's about MuseScore or Notation Express or just the field in general.
Yeah, so definitely people who are online, and if you have questions for Philip, by all means post them there. I think like questions that that I have, you've answered pretty much anything that I had like thought of ahead of time. One of the things that I'm probably most curious about is things like, well, you mentioned like the big four, and I'm happy that MuseScore is included in this big four of desktop notation programs. But then there's also tablets, and mention of StaffPad, which has really made some big advances of late. And I guess personally, my sense has always been when I've tried any notation program on my iPad, thinking, yeah, it's kind of cool that I can do this, but I think I'd rather have a light laptop and have that. But I don't know. I don't know how viable this is feeling, or if it feels like that's something of the future, or just a thing, just a side thing.
Well, it's a good question. And also, I don't want to exclude other products. I mean, there's certainly Notion, which
Right.
we've covered on the blog occasionally. And that's really, actually, really the only one that you can, is kind of cross-platform. You can move a Notion score between your, what I mean by cross-platform, meaning between your tablet and your desktop. I mean, that is something that none of the other products on your screen does. I mean, Avid does have like called a Scorch. It's a reader that you can read Sibelius files.
Same with us.
Right, but I think they have just realized that creating some sort of notation product on the iPad is such a heavy lift, in addition to everything else that they're doing, and so enter in StaffPad and a couple other products, something called Symphony Pro. There's something called MusicJot, Comp. So a number of products have or at least a touch notation. Kawai actually puts out a product. So there are roughly half a dozen, if not more, that attempt to do this at something of a professional level. But the one that I mean, this is one where I will maybe offer more of a definitive opinion, is that I feel like StaffPad now that we finally have the iPad update out there. I mean, this was a product that has been in the development for the better part of a decade, but it came out only on the Windows Surface about 5 years ago, almost to the day. It was about, I think it was in March 31st of 2015. And the reason it only came out on Surface is because of the Pen and Touch at that point was superior. I don't even think the Apple Pencil existed. You had like third-party products, the Jot and all these other things. So Apple wasn't really, Steve Jobs was like, I have the perfect input device. It's my fingers. He was very much against the stylus. Yeah. And then people, once the iPad really started taking hold, it's like, wait a second, this would be a perfect thing for people to be able to draw on and all that. Then Apple really started pushing the support for the Apple Pencil. But that's why StaffPad only came out on Windows Surface, and it wasn't only until 5 years later that they finally were able to take advantage of the improvements in the iPad and get it working. And it's beautiful, I have to say. I mean, I have to say that, with some caveat, like, it is still version 1.0 or 1.0.1 or whatever it is. There are a number of bugs. It crashes probably more than you would expect in something that you're relying on. And so with those caveats, I feel like that is probably the most promising prospect for work, because you're using it in a way that is very natural for an iPad. Like you're just writing, you're writing music, and then it just appears.
And for people who aren't aware, that's what you do. It's a draw. You write on it with the stylus, and it understands it. I mean, you draw a little circle and a stick, just like you were drawing it with a pencil.
Right. But I think to varying degrees of success, depending on how you write it and all that. And I think
voice recognition.
Exactly. So, or OCR for that matter. I mean, if you use SmartScore or PhotoScore, one of those products, there's some scores it's like magic, and some it's like, how did it even think that this was even remotely close to what was on the page, even though a human could read it with no problem. So, you have kind of to some degree the same issues with StaffPad. And but in addition to that, you do have like all the things that you would expect in modern notation software, cut, copy, paste, repeat, all the, transpose and all these. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. Plus,
Yeah.
it has a couple of things. It has a beautiful, and those people, you can find our extensive review on scoring notes that came out with. I'm sure it's still trending on the homepage.
Right.
But you can,
That link.
you can, I showed the play mode in Dorico. Well, in StaffPad, there's actually literally an overlay of the automation. I'm talking about volume, pan, expression, literally right on the music. It's real, and you can draw those curves and you can adjust the playback of the music. There are these third-party sample libraries that work really well with it. And then they have the StaffPad Reader, which just came out, which is a way of syncing over Wi-Fi between a score and a part. If you're in a session and you change something in the score, it automatically propagates to the part. That's really cool. And I feel like, again, like this is the most promising implementation of anything like this to date. And we haven't even mentioned like the music, the iPad readers that are basically for PDFs, like Fourscore and
Right.
Music. That's a different class category entirely, and we also cover those as well. But in terms of music, composing music, producing music, and then ultimately even performing from it, on a live basis, like being able to change the score in real time, StaffPad I feel is far and away the most promising one. And even then, I'm not sure I would quite trust it in a live situation yet. I feel like but the guys behind it are super bright and they're doing amazing work, and I'm certainly supportive of their efforts. So, and not to say the other ones aren't doing well as well, but it's just from what I've seen, I think that is, at least right now, that's the direction that iPad notation is, tablet, and the fact that it does work on Windows. There's a Windows version. There's no Android version, but it is like, that is cool that you could have a Windows Surface or an iPad and the software works on both. That is, that can't be easy to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's not going to be a lot of programs that are capable of running on both, just because technologically it's hard to do.
Exactly.
I know.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of stuff, and I feel like this would be a good opportunity to wrap up. Any concluding thoughts you'd like to put out there? I mean, I would definitely want to recommend everyone check out the Notation Express. Go check out the site, check out the article, and the video demo is really cool. But you just got to see it in action here too.
Yeah.
Any concluding thoughts, Philip?
Yeah, you mentioned the demo. Yeah, there is a free demo, which it's just one package that you can download, and it's the Mac and Windows versions of both of MuseScore, Sibelius, and Dorico. It's not really intended for real productive work because obviously it's disabled enough so that most of the functions aren't there. It's disabled so that you just there are a few things programmed in there, and you can get a sense of how it would work, but. Obviously, the intention is you can at least try it out to see if the Stream Deck app loads on your computer and and if it loads on your iPhone, and at least if that works correctly, then you've set it up correctly, and it will be smooth sailing to set the full product up on on your device. But other than that, I would just say, look, Mark, I kudos to you for doing this, for so many years. Your development of MuseScore and the team there. I think, especially talking to Daniel, Daniel Ray, that is, and some of the other folks there. It's exciting.
Thanks, Thomas. Actually, Thomas just popped in and said hi on the chat.
Hi, Tomas. Yeah, well, all friendly greetings and best wishes. I've always enjoyed working with Tomas for many years, and tell him that he has to come to New York, and we'll have to do another lunch at some point. Yeah, it's great to see how MuseScore has evolved, and all the products and the field. It's fun. And I have to say this. Maybe my concluding thing is to say, look, everybody in the field does something a little different, but you have to love it. It's obvious. I mean, I hope it's obvious that I ultimately I love this. It's fun and exciting, and hopefully it will continue for quite some time.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again so much. Thanks for your time. It was great chatting with you, and great seeing the people checking this out. And I hope people just continue to do so and go visit your site. And I think I will. We will get ready to sign off here. And as always, if people have ideas of topics for me to talk about in future weeks, let me know. I've got a few, kind of sitting at the back of my head, but I'm always up for further suggestions. So go check out the Scoring Notes blog. Go check out the Notation Express, and keep enjoying making music, everyone. Okay, goodbye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.